Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Prize Fighters, Circus Freaks, and Gangsters. I'm Greta.
And I'm Jamie.
And we are back here in the 19th century looking at the food, the fashion, the fun, the fighting, the fraud, and this week, the frolics.
Oh, yes. We finally get some more circus freaks.
I know, it's exciting. I'm going to have some questions for you about the Carnival.
Oh, all right. Well, I have many things to say about this Carnival.
So this week we are back joining our lawman of choice, Bass Reeves, and his adventures in Arkansas and Indian country over in Oklahoma.
Let's be real. This man's Black Superman. Let's just call it what it is. He's Black Superman.
It's true.
And yeah,
he is Black Superman.
There's nothing else you can call him. He's straight up Black Superman.
Including like emotional control. Like it's not just that he's the straightest, shooting hardest, riding, best dressed, most
goody two-shoesest.
Best at memorizing.
But he's a violent goody two-shoes, like Superman.
But only when you make him be violent. He never chooses violence. We spend what few words the man says, he spends a lot of them on that.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And not in a, stop making me beat you like this. It's more of a, I really don't want to have to hurt you. Please don't make me hurt you.
I mean, in the opening scene, he's like, they're out at this sort of general store in Indian country, and the bad guys have holed up inside the general store. And they're like, well, you know, it looks like he's probably going to shoot his way out of that. And Bass is like, look, maybe he's smarter than he hates. He has more smarts than hate for me. And Billy Crow's like, I don't think so, Bob. You're only the guy who thinks he's smarter. I'm here.
Yep. Billy Crow's great. I love that character so much.
He is a really great character, and I love him that he's not just like subservient, like, oh, you're the boss and I'm the assistant guy. Like he's really there to be a different point of view on a bunch of situations. And they use him that way. Yeah,
and this is one of the first, I mean, Warrior being a similar show, but it's really been rare in my experience that we get a show that is even about a non-white person that doesn't have a secondary character who's like his second in command, who's really kind of
or like a real like a real present voice who is like there to sort of make the white folks feel comfy watching this.
Yeah, there's none of that. There's nothing that is intended to make white folks feel comfortable about watching this.
In fact, the only like happy family life or like sort of like, hey, this is a functional family life we see is a non-white family, and it's Bass's family. And they're not a perfect family, they're a realistic family.
Incredibly realistic family. I hesitate to use this example because it seems a bit bad in retrospect, but the Cosby Show, when the Cosby Show first came out, it felt much more real than a lot of the sitcoms of the era. You know, the conversationals felt less staged and a little more realistic. I don't know. I felt like that was a more realistic, and it was billed as a more realistic sitcom. Don't you feel like?
Yeah. I mean, the hell with you, Bill Cosby, for like ruining, just being a bastard under all that. Because there was a lot going on in this show that I think was really important to see. Not only like, hey, black families are real, but that TV families and the fake conflicts that we've been watching every week are fake and dumb and harmful to everybody trying to figure out, like, how does family work?
Yeah, and because the Cosby show was so kind of, I mean, it was basically a black family as imagined by white people and written by white people. And so I feel like it was as much of a fantasy or a sci-fi show as it was a realistic show in which it gave people an opportunity to view social issues in such a way that it wasn't really off-putting because nobody could really identify with the characters on the Cosby Show. They were kind of an idealized version of an American family. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like,
to a certain extent, But it was such a refreshing break from the bullshit black families that we grew up with, where it would be black kids with dead parents living with white families.
Or just the crushingly depressing Good Times. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That show, if you ever think that the 70s might have been a good time to be alive, watch 10 minutes of an episode of Good Times and you'll change your tune. Holy shit. That one crushes the soul, that show.
And yet, Good Times and the Jeffersons and stuff. I mean, there is still a lot about those shows that people still remember fondly.
I just can't imagine how. Thankfully we are in 2024 getting to enjoy this amazing show, Bass Reeves.
Yes.
Which is giving us a hyper-realistic version of... I mean, it's like we're in a time machine getting to watch the 19th century, so it's amazing.
There is a lot of time machine stuff in here, and sort of the first fun one is going to the general store, because there's like people sort of milling around who don't know that there's like bad things about to go down. And so they're just like looking at flour sacks and deciding on new parts for their wagon and whatever. And then, holy shit, this is a good fight. Like, no wonder people are like going into town is dangerous and terrible.
This really didn't happen, though. I mean, that's why they had the ordinances against guns and things like that. So you didn't have to worry about getting shot in the back while buying flour.
Except this was in Indian country. So you didn't have that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But I did, once again, because I've been studying glass so much, I'm like, those panes on those windows were way too big and way too clear. But I was like, I think somewhere they decided gunshots are too boring in real life. So we always have to shoot out glass windows, like in the old Western movies where they were doing all the sound in post-production. It's like you put in the glass breaking so like you sort of know where the gunshot sounds go. It's a trope that we've developed.
Yeah, well, and also you can't put a bunch of holes in the walls of these buildings because they were shooting 3 movies a day. They needed that set to stay intact.
Just as an old movie kind of thing is that you'd like do all of the filming and then you'll notice the glass shots of the windows are always close-ups. So those are filmed at a different time. They just have a bunch of like glass getting shot out, like B-roll hanging around and they just stuff in there.
Oh, that's the, what do they call that? The second
unit? Or
second unit, yes, the second unit. That's what they call that. And often the second unit is the one who makes the entire movie and the director gets all the credit.
But I was sort of thinking about like how over the ages glass getting shot out has been made such a trope that it becomes important in this, so we recognize the scene for like what it is and what's going on. And you're like, yeah, but this store way out in the middle of nowhere in Indian country, would they have had glass panes like that? And would they have, like, those were big.
It would have just been a big-ass open window that would have been covered over with shutters at night. The end.
Right. Yeah. But it is just sort of so fun. And then we have the cow pen out front. And
plus, I mean, can you imagine the store owner would have been killing the U.S. Marshals for having broken his glass if that was the case.
There you go.
If there was real glass in there, there would have been a lot of dead U.S. Marshals.
Yes. So, Billy Crow, after his whole kind of, I don't know, his consternation, his confusion, his like self-confusion over killing a dude last episode is coming to get him this episode where he has to shoot like another guy. Like the kid's, he's got some issues and he doesn't know what to do with them.
Yeah, he's kind of, I feel like it's kind of a emblematic of a lot of the people that like live in the civilized world guys. We go through this issue where we want to be like the erudite, well-read, learned man, but then you got to have the tough guy exterior at the same time, and it's a battle of how to, and you see that with Billy Crow because he really is well-read. He's really, really well-spoken, and if it wasn't for the color of his skin, he'd probably be doing something very, very hoity-toity and important, but tragically he has his skin tone's wrong, and now he's forced into a life of crime, but now he can do life of fighting crime. But still, it's not what he wants to do.
Right, but he does have that sort of like people-pleasing, glad-handing, quick-tongue, thing that would allow him just to like scamper up the political ladder. But like you said, he's he's a red man, as they would say in the old days. And so you can't have them.
No.
Which just, bar. Okay, so what did you think about the little dog loop that they did in there, where they were coming into the store and the dog was like vicious, the chained up dog was viciously barking?
Well, so he goes and he takes a sledgehammer and he smashes the chain and lets this dog loose. And I'm thinking, I mean, how else are you going to free this dog? Because he's a snarling, snapping dog. But by the same token, that chain is really going to injure that dog as he's running around.
Yeah, I was
just like, oh my God, this poor fucking dog. Like, now he's just going to have to walk everywhere, so he's never going to get to eat. And that's where my brain went with it. Where was your brain going? Because obviously I went a whole different...
Because I was like, okay, this is supposed to be a metaphor of like, you sort of let the guy free, all angry and snarly when they're chained up. And then, when he pops the chain and lets the dog go. And at first I was just like, what a lame metaphor. But also that poor dog with that chain around it. But then, because I'm always doing headcanon, I'm like, at the end, I was like, this dog is sort of like throwing the question in about this convict that Bass is going to have to take to the Red River, take across the Red River. So I was like, oh, I think that's more complicated. Or maybe it's not. And I just made it more complicated. But
well, and you know what? And that dog also represents the fact that Bass is forever tormented by his past and the chains that bound him in life. Yes.
Yeah, like it's freedom, but then, yes, we find out about the carnival that comes to town, and this is the legacy of the railroad, or this is one product of the railroad.
Okay.
That, you have all of these heavy tents and all of these people, like, you look at these people in the carnival, they're not hiking anywhere, So the railroad makes it easier for them to get from town to town quickly.
I hadn't made the association with the transportation, but that explains. So when I saw this, number one, it wouldn't have been called a carnival because this is 1872 or something like that, and
yeah, it's the 1870s.
Yeah, so this would have been called a fun fair or a fair. But it wouldn't have been called a carnival. The term carnival really wasn't used until 1893 from the World's Fair, when they really codified the whole fair idea. They combined, because all these things grew out of the medicine show, essentially. The carnival, the medicine show, and the circus all together kind of formed out of the same thing and then kind of merged similarly back into the same thing. And so this was pre-vaudeville, but kind of post-medicine show because it's bigger than a medicine show. Although certain medicine shows were as big as this fair. And the reason why I go into this is because I was trying to find a dividing line between fair and medicine show. And it seems to be who was running it. And if so, there was like the Kickapoo Indian all-natural cure company that used to run the Kickapoo Carnival or medicine show or something like that, and it was like a state fair. It was a state fair, but it was run by this snake oil company that would sell this liniment that allegedly came from Native Americans. It was just a gimmick for selling shit. But so that's how all of these things grew up, was out of this medicine show would just travel around, and they would travel with different performers that would give like performances that had nothing to do with the snake oil they were selling. And then it was just like the flashy lights that like are on different stores now to just catch your eye. It's exactly like YouTube. You're watching a video on YouTube and then you get an advertisement. And so it's exactly the same because these were short performances. They were like 3 to 10 minute performances. So they'd have somebody perform, then the guy would come out and would be with a zany. And we saw a zany with a clown who was like kind of leading people down the street at the beginning. I think it was the end of the last episode. But it was he was kind of drumming up interest in the carnival or the fair or the medicine show, and they would go through town and like tell everybody about it and then kind of lead the procession in. Yeah. That was at the top of this episode. And he was dressed sort of properly, but everything was like a little exaggerated. Like his hat was too tall, his collar was too big, the clothes he was wearing were like a little too bright. Again, like you can go into somewhere respectable and that not be the thing. Instead it's like, wow, he's kind of flashy.
And so, yeah, it was eye-catching.
There you go. Yeah, so he's a flashy everyman, I think is like the best way to put it, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of what you get with the people on QVC and things like that.
Right.
And so these guys would go with the medicine show guy, and I'm just going to give that because this is my like kind of area of historical expertise. And so they would travel and perform with the medicine show man specifically. So they'd have these other performers like acrobats, which we see in this episode, and strong men and actors and singers and
fortune tellers.
Exactly.
And,
every kind of person.
Sword swallowers.
And then the zany would be in the crowd kind of like mixing it up with them, and then would go onto the stage and do something like trip and fall down the stairs or something. Some Three Stooges type slapstick stuff.
Okay.
And then the doctor would come out with a remedy for, oh, well, I have the way to fix that. And then he would kind of do that. And then they would maybe do some tooth pulling, which was a real big thing where they would call it painless tooth pulling. And the painless part was the fact that they would rip the tooth out super fast and then jam a ton of cotton wadding in your mouth before you could scream. And they would stuff so much in there that it would muffle your scream, and then they would shove you off stage to go recover. Yeah, and so people would just go and watch these people getting their teeth ripped out. Sometimes they would pull the wrong one and have to go to a next one,
But okay,
because the guy's drunk usually too.
Point in time, there were plenty of people who were suffering from debilitating toothaches, and this was still a point in time where you could literally die of a toothache. In that, like, the tooth would get so impacted and so infected from the abscess, from the infection on your tooth, that you could die of septic shock. So, yeah, people knew you could die of toothache. So they're like, anybody need a tooth out? And I'm sure there are always a couple of people like,
completely painless. I've got this brand new cure. And maybe they would wipe some, like, cocaine solution on there or something to dull the pain, or give you some Vin Mariani to drink before you do it or something like that. But usually it was just get in the chair and they'd yank it on out. So,
and I'm sure so many of these people were in so much pain. They're like, painless, painful. My life sucks right now, so I don't care.
Yeah. You get this rotting, stinking thing out of my face. Because a rotting tooth doesn't smell good either.
No.
Like, everybody else is around them is like nudging them, like hitting them with an elbow, like, get up there, get that stinking thing out of your face.
I mean, I just remember the last time I had an earache, and it had been absolutely years, and there's very little you can do for it, like, if it's like hanging out above, like, what the Advil can do. And I was just remember, I'm like, just think when you couldn't even just kind of like kill the pain off. Like, no wonder people got just absolutely fucking smashed off of the highly alcoholic medicines they were making.
Right? Yeah. But at this time, everybody was feeling nice because this was the era of Vin Mariani and other coca wines. So everybody was feeling nice at this thing. When they showed up, they were feeling very speedy and a little bit drunk.
So my other thought is sort of like, I'm like, the glass is too clear and the panes are too big. This carnival, way too clean.
Yeah.
Their whites were spotless white. I mean, everybody was looking good. But everybody in the show is way too clean and fine. Like, I'm okay with it. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, we wouldn't be able to see the performers for all the flies, probably, if this was any kind of accurate. So it's probably for the best. But yeah, this is fun. So this was also the beginning of roller coasters is around in this time. So some of these traveling carnivals, they didn't have it in this episode, but they would have had hand-powered rides where they had teams of boys who would pull you up it was just like a hill, and it was kind of like one of those wavy up and down little mountain ride things.
Sure, yeah.
But it was basically to simulate being in a runaway cart on a like a mining cart. And so you're on a runaway mining cart. That's kind of what it's supposed to feel like. And so, like, the rides grew out of that. And the first steam-powered rides were around at this time. So they would have had a carousel and a calliope with a steam-powered calliope. And those things are loud as shit. But that's circus music. When you think of circus music, that's a calliope.
And actually, I think it's really cool that you bring up music, because song definitely starts to play a bigger role in this series. And like you sort of realize the number of people they have singing these like work songs, these travel songs, these very repetitive songs. Like everything was quiet. And so people is basically, you had to expend energy to fill the space, whether you were playing an instrument, whether you were singing, or, you know, doing some human powered work. And so I really like the use of song in this episode especially, but how they're doing it in this series, because it's very true as well.
And it really is a great follow-up to Blazing Saddles, because the use of song as an identifier of membership in a community is really like essential to this episode in particular, because he's walking with his prisoner and they start singing what is an old spiritual. And I mean, I don't know the song, but it was even a call and repeat song that they were singing right as they cut to the carnival. And so I thought that was really interesting, because going back to Blazing Saddles, when Cleavon or whoever was telling him to sing one of those songs. No, the songs like you guys sing.
The spirituals. Yeah. And actually, here's the fun bit, is when Bass and his prisoner were singing, they both knew the song, and Billy Crow's looking like, what are you doing? But that was a fairly new song, because it specifically referred to being a conductor on a train.
Oh, good ear.
Yeah. Good ear. Yeah. So it would have been a pretty new song. Hey, yeah, it's where your brain is. But
and you know what's fun is that in real life, Billy Crow may have known the tune of the song and been wondering, where the hell do these words come from? Because I know the words to that, and they're in a language you two idiots don't speak. Because a lot of the tunes to the songs of the spirituals came from old Native American songs. All of the ways that they harmonize their voices and everything, that was lifted. So they took the tunes and then applied new lyrics and new language and new rhythms. And so that gospel sound and that became rock came from a fusion of African and Native American sounds.
And here's the other thing that people don't realize, just because we have music played for us, is that, you know, a lot of these songs were done globally, and not just in Africa, not just Native Americans, but anywhere you had people working. And so a lot of these are women's songs, as they're like doing laundry or pounding grain or, you know, doing these things all together. And so it's sort of, if you're doing a group task, it keeps everybody on rhythm and like involved, but there's also a trance element to it. Like if you've ever listened to trance music, and especially people who sort of really get into it and groove in it, like it creates sort of a timelessness about it. And so all of these work songs have like thousands of verses if you like look through what everybody's written down, and they're very easy to make up because the verses are very short. And it's this way of altering time for the people who are doing this like deadly boring task, or just traveling a long way on foot.
Yeah, all right, I see that. So it's, I mean, I always think of Kid Rock songs as being real trash, because you can predict the words that he's going to say before he says them, especially in a lot of his like
Right.
more pro-America songs. And I always found it funny as hell, but that actually is a mark of a good songwriter, I guess. And those songs that you were referring to, where you can predict the next line, that's a very useful thing when you don't necessarily know the song, but you're, like you said, trying to pass the time. And like, I didn't realize that EDM trance was intended to also, I guess it's in the name, but it just didn't dawn on me that I just was like, what the why is this so fucking repetitive? But because I always loved happy hardcore when trance was coming out, so because I like super happy hamster music.
Yeah.
But
And we'll spin around to this at the end of the episode, but way at the beginning of when I was looking into American food and sort of thinking about slavery and just like going back and back and back and thinking about all of these women grinding grain all over the world, I ended up finding some like audio artifacts and sort of talking about, and you just listen to these like layers of voices, not particularly trained, and they're in this very sort of limited register, and you can just sort of feel how like it's sort of this buzz that alters time. And if you've got to get somewhere, or if you've got to grind a certain amount of grain, something to change your perception of time, that's probably a good thing.
There you go. You just sing in that like Godsmack range.
Yeah.
Stone Temple Pilots, and you're all set.
Okay, so we end up in the garden with Jenny and Sally, mother and daughter, and I was just like, this was the most realistic, like, parent, teenage, child conversation I've seen in a long time. And I was enjoying those handmade trellises they had out there in the garden, but, you know, Sally is just chafing at being a teenager, and she's like, why won't you make our lives better? Why we gotta suffer when I know we don't have to suffer like this? Why we gotta work so hard?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's basically a tale as old as time, that one.
Yeah, and it was so well done, and, you know, I don't want you to get spoiled. And, hey, I'm asking you a hard question. I want a thoughtful answer, Mom. And Mom says, you know, you just do what you're told. So I was like, this is what you always say when you don't answer a question. It's just perfection.
Oh, my mom was quick with it because I said so.
Yeah.
Woo, she was quick with it.
And part of why I love the show is they really, like, jump to the next scene when Bass comes home, and you can just see how conflicted Jenny is. Like, yes, you're making our life better. You are a terrible farmer. I do have my piano, but I never fucking see you.
Yeah.
And, so you're like, okay, a lot of, like, Jenny's inability to deal with Sally is, of course, you know, how she was ever dealt with as a kid, obs. But that, like, she's dealing with a bunch of stuff that she doesn't know how to deal with.
And this is also, again, a very real life, and it's something a lot of us go through now, because it's a lot of, everybody has to work, and both parents have to work, and it's like, well, I want all of us to eat. That's why you never see me. But shit, I would like to see you every now and again. So, yeah, I feel like that's a timeless argument, or a timeless kind of conversation as well.
And how the reasons for the friction are ever changing, and no matter how good it is, it's always going to be just this bad. But that, you know, the reasons change, but the dynamic remains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just one more way to show you how nuanced and conflicted these characters are, which is so amazing. It's so true to life, and it's so hard to get your arms around the 19th century sometimes, because you're like, but I thought they were allied against that person, and why are they standing there holding hands? Yeah. What the fuck is happening? And it never makes sense. And so you have to go all the way down into their family life to see, oh, well, now I understand why they made that decision. Right. That otherwise makes no sense at all.
And so Bass gets back from this one job, and he gets in there. He's like, oh, I'm so ready to go home, see my wife, take a bath, get some clean clothes. And they're like, dude.
Oh, and take these kids to the carnival, because I've been promising them for weeks or months or whatever.
And you got this other assignment. He's like, I ain't been home in 41 days. I thought that was, like, such a good thing right there. I was like, yeah, So, yeah, Jenny is just so mad at this point. She's like, fine, Arthur can take you to the carnival. I don't care anymore. I was, like, trying to guard you against, but maybe it's time you found out how untrustworthy dudes are, or I'm just mad.
Well, I'm sure at that point she was just like, God damn it, everybody's against me. You know, it's one of those where you're like, yeah. I have been trying to hold down my end, and everybody's against me, so fuck it. Everybody does what they want then. You know?
Fine. Everybody do what you want. Yeah. I don't care anymore. Yeah. You go to the carnival with Arthur. You go to work. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So. And you know, you're going to have as much fun as you can possibly have for that 4 hours or whatever. But when the conversation ended with, I don't care, do whatever you want, you're going to have a bill that's going to come due fairly soon. And you're going to pay heavily. You are going to pay heavily for that one.
Yeah, well, you know, Sally, she's got her own teenage thing. She doesn't know. And so, yeah, we do get to see Sally and Arthur going around, like I said, the cleanest carnival ever, and seeing all these different characters that, you know, I think some of them would have definitely been in a carnival at somewhere like Fort Smith, and I think some of them were a little bit made up for that place and time.
Okay.
But I'm sure you have more to say on that. But there was the fortune teller character who had the crystal ball, and I'm like, no matter what, that thing existed in that place and time and would have been really fascinating to a certain type of person.
Yes. Oh, yeah, because spiritualism was starting to get real popular in the 1870s, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it really peaked in the 1890s. But yeah, it was and people just loved seances, anything having to do with the occult. And yeah, so that would have been one of the most popular booths at the thing, I would imagine.
Well, and even people who are of a scientific bent at that point were sort of like willing to entertain the occult because, again, so much was happening at this time. Like, people had discovered germs and could like cure diseases, you know, in different ways. And people were isolating chemicals. You know, you could make chlorine gas using electricity. You could talk to somebody in, you know, San Francisco from New York in like tiny little pieces of time. So maybe you could talk to the spirits. There were some early, very scientific people who did, hey, all this other shit I never heard of is happening. So
Yeah, but it also, all these new technologies gave all of these magicians, and that's what they were like David Copperfield magicians, gave them new technology to create new special effects with, so their shows became more and more crazy with like lights and like you would see apparitions over people and all kinds of this is where all of the special effects stuff that was eventually put into movies, this is where it all was born from medicine shows and the yeah. And so and also the idea of like doing special effects for spiritualism goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. All those crazy automata and things that we know about, all that stuff was just made to be like, whoa, we're in a fucking haunted house. And like, that's what it was to feel Jesus or whatever. It was like, you were in a haunted house where these giant mechanized birds were flying at you and blood was spurting out of statues. Like,
but I mean, you even just think about like photography and flash powder. And so magicians were able to like snap their fingers and like literal flames would leap out of their fingers and they could do it again. How?
And they could capture your image in a mirror, which is what they were doing. So they were magicians who stole your image from a mirror and they handed it to you on a piece of paper. Like, I had never really thought of it in that way, but holy shit, they really were magicians.
Yeah.
'Cause that is what photography is taking, because people used to look at themselves in a mirror at a place and be like, all right, I can see myself there. Well, they wanted to capture that image. And so that's why photography involved these mirrors and things. It's because they were literally taking the image off of a mirror. And it's just so cool, like being able to see the evolution of it. And as we talk about it, it all makes even more sense.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard for us modern people to get our brains around like how earth-shaking some of this was. And like it just, like people could not deal with it sort of the same way people are sort of not able to deal with some of the changes that are going on right now. It's just like they just shut down and freak out and like, I can't.
First time I ever played a LAN party game for Doom, I think that was the first time I ever stayed up all night. I didn't stay up all night exactly, but I think I slept like a half hour. I didn't stop playing the fucking game. I sat down and continued playing it nonstop. I think the other guy, the guy that I was playing for, had to go and study for an exam or something. But yeah, I genuinely did not move except to pee. It was amazing. So, yeah.
And so, so some people absolutely just shut down, and then other people are absolutely captivated, and it takes over their lives. And yeah, it is a really, truly, like, worldview altering experiences, a lot of these things that are happening.
What was your world altering experience? Did you have like a Doom experience like I had where you were like, holy shit, because that was like, this is the fucking internet? Yes!
I don't know. I've never really sort of thought about that. I will say that like after sort of during high school and like for a chunk of time after college, I traveled as much as I absolutely could, and it would occasionally just like hit me. I am just an individual person, like sitting somewhere in Italy, just eating on my own, and I could just like do that. And then I will be home in 3 days. And my life will go on. On another continent, just, I'm just able to travel around like on my own, by myself, among people I don't know, will never see again. And the world just like, it functions this way now? Holy crap.
When did that become a thing that you could do? Because I didn't even know that this wasn't a thing that women could do in my adult life. I didn't know that.
Or I'm even just thinking...
I don't think a lot of men do know.
Or even just like...
That it was unsafe for women. Because I'd hear my wife say it, well, it's not safe for me to travel or to... back in the day, my ex-wife. And I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because I never really thought about, like, it being unsafe for women to go anywhere. But, yeah.
So, I think there's, like, 2 or 3 levels there. Because for a long time, like, you just could not travel by yourself. Like, the logistics of it made it impossible, basically.
Yeah, you weren't a legal human.
Oh, so no. I'm just like talking sort of like in humanity. But I think like if you were a rich dude, travel kind of like, oh, I feel like going somewhere. I think kind of in the Middle Ages that became kind of a thing, but you'd still have your like whole retinue that had to come with you. I think really it was the mechanization of travel. Steamships and railroads sort of made that possible, because then even like poor men, like, hey, I'm a poor Irish peasant and I can just like go to New York and work in a factory there.
So you didn't really that never occurred to me that you wouldn't just like hop on a horse and travel by yourself. That never would. I mean, unless you were like a cowboy or some shit, you weren't just traveling on your own, really.
Right. Well, you think about it, like going somewhere not to do business, that's really a young idea to like, because basically it used to be people moved around because either they were changing where they lived or they were doing some sort of business. Just traveling for pleasure, I think, at least in the Western world, is a 19th century invention, because the railroads definitely realized like there's only so much freight. But, we only move wheat at this time of year. We only move cows at this time of year. We only move grapefruits at this time of year. But if we can get people to travel all the time, that's a steady stream of income.
Those tea cutters really kind of kicked it off, huh? The tea cutters, when they decommissioned the tea cutters from being...
Oh, the clipper ships. Yeah.
So there used to be these really, really fast sailing ships that would travel with tea. And they were like the fastest giant ships on the planet. And those were eventually...
Oh, yeah. They're the roots of the America's Cup race.
Oh, yeah. The thing that only the richest people in the world could ever possibly give a flying fuck about.
But that's the whole thing. The clipper ships were originally built to cater to the very richest people in the world from the start. Okay. Because only the very richest people in the world could afford the tea that was brought back from China at those high speeds. So building these clippers was a gamble.
Interesting.
And then they were once the tea trade changed again, those clipper ships were used to move people around the oceans as fast as possible. And again, it was only the very richest people. And so you would take somebody from, say, New York to San Francisco, not because they were a poor miner who was going to set up shop, but because they were a financier who, was looking to do some wheeling and dealing.
Well, at least until steamships came out.
And again, I think it's the mechanization when you first start getting people to travel to go see a place instead of to go do something for work.
Right. Or be an adventurer. But being an adventurer is far different than being a tourist.
Right, because being an adventurer, you're not necessarily expecting to go home. And being an adventurer was kind of a job. I mean, it's a very gambly job, but it was a job.
And all of them in the 19th century definitely had the Greek War of Independence on their resume. I mean, if Bass Reeves had been white, he would have had that on his resume as well.
Yes. Yeah, he would have... So we totally got off on this huge tangent about the invention of travel for fun, travel for pleasure. And yeah, the 19th century is really when rich people were kind of doing that earlier on, but the 19th century is definitely, absolutely, 100% when it became sort of a widespread, more public phenomenon, for sure.
And like you said, and it's so weird to think about, but like if you guys think about for a second all the things you bring with you on a trip, and then just think about the things you put in your bag that are electronic. And each one of those things represents at least one person, unless you're talking about your phone, which represents probably 1 million people. But putting your phone aside,
entire entourage.
Yeah, your hair clippers are, 3 people or something like that. And so, like...
Right.
Yeah, it's just, so you had to bring all those people in your suitcase. It was a hell of a thing. So the mechanization, we're not just talking about transportation, we're talking about down to inventing the safety razor in the early 1900s. So you didn't have to fucking have some specialized person try to shave you while you're on a fucking ship, which is crazy. But
that's why all sea captains had beards, I'm sure.
Yeah, because otherwise you'd end up with a slit throat over the side.
Yeah. And so that is interesting. We have the contrast of Edwin. You know, he's at the fair talking about his new Eden place with Esme, and like. Wait.
Here is a thing that I had to watch this episode 3 or 4 times to catch.
Okay.
But I had been on the fence about Edwin Jones, about whether or not he was a good guy or a bad guy.
Okay.
And here we have very, very clear evidence. He is standing on a little step, yelling.
Yep.
Making him a mountebank, which is a charlatan. This is, if you ever see a person standing on something yelling, they are lying. And so this man is selling bullshit. We know it for a fact. This is a time-honored tradition that goes back at least as far back as the Romans, and probably into antiquity we can't even understand. But
look, as
this
long
man
as
is a liar, and we know it right here.
Yeah. And
yes,
yet he's using important language at that point. He is pointing out that, you know, it is the 1870s and Reconstruction is being rapidly dismantled. And so he is saying a lot of very true things. Like, yeah, these promises.
Yes, the best lies are mostly truth, right?
Yeah, like all of these things had been promised to you. You know, life was going to get better. It's like, nope. They're all going to take it all right back away. So if you want something, you're going to have to make it yourself. So give me your money and come with me.
And so these guys weren't all political, by the way. So when you're seeing these, like if you were to be walking around a World's Fair at this time, and also the difference between a fair and a carnival, at least now, and I assume then, it has to do more with like the number of stalls that are for marketplace selling. So people just selling wares rather than having like food and games at every single stall. And so they would have had... at the time that this was going on, there was a guy named George Barker Winship who was going around. He was a Harvard professor who invented this deadlift machine that he called the health machine. And he made super popular. It was one of the first home exercise machines. And this guy was crazy popular, and he was really like big on the circuit. So it could have been something that we are just like is off screen right now is George Barker Winship 3 years before he died of a stroke, because the same physicians who were testing all the stuff about exercise were also doing a case study on Vin Mariani, which they wrote a pamphlet that is available online that it was published a couple of years after his death. But they were all very, very happy about Vin Mariani.
Wine and cocaine.
They did not mention that this man had a stroke at the age of 42. And actually, it actually held back weightlifting, this guy's life, because he's running around telling everybody about the wonders of a strong deadlift and having a strong back, and you're going to live forever. And then he had a stroke at 42. So they were like, yeah, weightlifting will make you have a stroke at 42. So they actually reduced the amount of interest in weightlifting due to him. But it was really the coke that killed him and not weightlifting.
I know some of those cocoa wines also would have arsenic in them as well, which wasn't doing anybody any favors.
Well, it does. Arsenic is in... Wait, no, arsenic is not strychnine, is it? Those are two different things.
Those are, or was it strychnine? But yeah, it was.
It's strychnine. So strychnine is a stimulant in very small amounts. So they did use it as a stimulant, but because poison is in the dosage, right? You just got to dose it right. And the problem is they were using droppers at that time. And it's very difficult to dose anything correctly with droppers unless it's very diluted.
Well, and like people are working in drachms and coins and corns and all of these like measurements. And then also the source material that they were using to manufacture the strychnine was of unknown potency as well. So there was that problem. So
yeah, many of the same problems that we run into with supplements today.
Yeah.
You get unknown provenance, which is generally China, and you're like, well, this could come with a side of lots of heavy metal poisoning, but we don't know. We'll just roll the dice.
Maybe it's $2,000 a gram dead caterpillars, and maybe it's just vacuum sweepings. We don't know.
What we do know is supplements are worthless. We don't know if they're going to kill you, but we do know they're worthless. The science is unequivocal.
Yeah.
So these fairs, they usually had a menagerie of wild animals, freak shows, waxworks, so like wax dummies and things like that. Boxing or wrestling challenges. So there'd be booths where there'd be a wrestler or a boxer, and they would just take on all challengers, and there'd be some prize or whatever if you beat them. But these people were usually mean as shit, so they were waiting for ringers to come in and try some weirdness, and then they would really hurt them. And then there were theatrical shows as well.
You don't need both your eyes, do you? No.
Oh yeah, especially in the South, they were real big in gouging eyes out, like you said. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, on these for these guys though, it was usually they would just break your fingers. They were real big on like if you were going to tie up with them and you grappled before, right?
Yeah,
so nobody would ever just grab your fingers, but they would just grab your fingers and break them right out of the gate, so you couldn't grab them, and that way you couldn't win the $500 or whatever.
Oh, yeah. So we don't get to see that kind of conflict, but we do get to see like. On one hand, Bass Reeves is sort of experiencing like, hey, I'm a really competent dude and they've given me the badge, but there's still all of these dangers for Sally and Arthur as they go and just try to be human beings at the fair. And I mean, part of it is Sally is a big girl and this little white girl is a little girl, but the larger problem is she is just a little white girl and Sally is carrying around this big old chip on her shoulder, especially after fighting with her mom. And so she dresses down this kid she doesn't know.
I never was one to adhere to any social strictures. So anytime somebody would say, you're not supposed to talk to that person, I would immediately go tell them about themselves. And so I really understand where she's coming from here. Luckily, the entire weight of the U.S. government was not against me while I was doing that. So I managed to survive into adulthood. But I would not have in the 19th century, especially if I was any color other than what I am right now.
Right. Oof. And Arthur is like, he has actually been out in the world quite a bit more, especially as an orphan, than Sally has. And he's like, just and so looking at sort of...
And also, your dad might be Bass Reeves, but you are not Bass Reeves.
You are not. They don't know and they don't care right now. But sort of like looking at the Sally Arthur thing, and then we get to see Esme and Jenny back and forth. And it was kind of funny how Esme does try to bust Sally. Oh yeah, I saw Sally at the fair with Arthur. Jenny's like, I know, I sent him. But I think she was trying to get Sally into a little trouble.
Oh, totally.
And so Esme and Jenny are going back and forth with the like bad things are happening to black folks. And Jenny's like, really, how bad is it? These are just stories. And Esme's like, no, this is why I'm a little more cutthroat than you are. You have it so good here on this land that you own, and you believe everything's okay because your husband's a lawman. But that's not how things are forming up in the world.
Yeah. And I'm glad that I rewatched these episodes a couple of times because there was stuff I didn't pick up on initially. And so they keep talking about the Sundown Man and where these people are disappearing off to. And they're all kind of looking at Bass a little when they talk about Sundown Man, like, yeah, do you know where the people you're capturing are going? No, you probably fucking don't, do you? And I didn't pick up on that the first time.
I hadn't thought of.
But there's a lot of people. Nobody actually says nobody actually says Uncle Tom or anything along those lines.
Right,
but
yeah.
like there's a lot of implications there. They just leave it unsaid off the end of a sentence.
Yeah.
So, and I couldn't figure out where that was coming from until I watched the episodes a couple of times.
Yeah, because the convict that he's taking down to the Red River, there is a lot of interesting stuff there. Like the dude in Texas who got killed, and sort of the politicians down there who are like, hey, we want you to bring this guy back to Texas so we can hang him there. Like, on one hand, that could seem like, because we don't trust the law enforcement in your neck of the woods, and maybe you're his buds and you let him off, because that was a thing that happened. But it is so clearly petty ass revenge. It's like, no, we want to personally hang this black man who did one of our guys dirty.
Yeah, well, that tracks with everything I've ever known about Texans of that era.
And so the conversation that Bass and the convict are having about like why he killed the plantation owner, like Bass is kind of like going back and forth, and you can see him retreating into, you just got to follow the law, and you didn't follow the law, and that's why. And the convict is like, yeah, but there was no law. Like, what do you do when there is no law? And that's the question Esme's asking Jenny as well. Like this conflict through the series is starting to build up. I want to be part of Law and Order, but what if Law and Order is screwing everybody over?
Right. And then there's also the aspect of, with all of these lawmen, they are former criminals of one sort or another. And so there's an aspect of, somebody gave you a fucking break, because clearly we all know your origin story. You knocked out this white man. You should have been hung for it. But you weren't, and somebody made you a lawman. So why am I not getting afforded the same right? Like, I killed my former slave master. He was a piece of shit. Like, how am I not getting this break? I'm a dope guy. And so he must have gotten that pitch every one of the 3,000 people he arrested. Like, wait, why are you the one who gets a break and I don't?
And I mean, even Billy Crow, like, he did get that break.
Yeah, exactly. So they all got a break to get started, and it's just like, well, why not me?
I do like, and again, they're not explaining it to you. Like, nothing is laid out. You have to pay attention and watch and listen to what these people are saying and what they're not saying. I know that's a cliche, but...
And you can't look down at your phone for 1 minute, or you will miss subtext that you will then miss an entire subplot from episodes.
And so then I think we get one of the more fun side stories, side trips, when Bass and the convict and Billy stay at these Mexican folks' house. Again, there was a lot to unpack here, and it was so cool. So, you're in, quote unquote, Indian territory in Oklahoma. You have this Spanish/Mexican couple, but you realize they are Indians from, like, northern Mexico. They are just as much sort of, quote unquote, Indians as the Choctaw or the Creek or the Seminole. Mm-hmm. It's just how they were or were not incorporated into New Spain,
right,
versus the way the sort of the Indians who were and were not incorporated into New America. And there's so much wrapped up in that. I can't even like unpeel it now. I'm still trying to figure it out.
I feel like the repercussions of that sort of thing, and kind of like the development of the Cyrillic alphabet and the Orthodox Church, and how it created these schisms in different civilizations. I feel like we're kind of going to see that with the Apple-Microsoft split, or like with the Apple ban that Musk is making at all of his companies. Maybe we're going to see the same split in our civilization, where it's just like, well, this one seemingly trivial event just spurred this split in civilization.
Yeah, so. Yeah. But it was really funny that, normally Billy is sort of the clueless one and just sort of like tagging along with Bass. But when they meet this Spanish couple, all of a sudden Bass is out of his league, because they don't speak like Choctaw or Creek. They speak Spanish, and Billy's the one that speaks it. Mm-hmm. And then when they make them tea, did you catch what was going on?
Oh, yeah, I did. Because, so she starts making tea and she says something like, I smell death on you or something. And Billy's just chugging this tea. The guy who's the prisoner covers his cup and then motions to, don't drink it to Bass, who follows his lead. Like he had taken a sip, but he was looking wary, and then he set his cup down and was like, Nope, this lady might be poisoning us.
Yeah, I was like, it was sleeping potion or poison. We weren't sure. I thought it was Billy who identified the herb.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, because there was something in a glass jar.
Ah.
That they like spent some camera time on. I'm like, I have no idea what that was. I wouldn't blame the Spanish couple. You've got like these three unknowns, and you're like, let's just drug them, put them out. Maybe and just sleep soundly.
Yeah, they can go sleep in the barn. Well, you wouldn't let strangers sleep in your house anyway. You would let them sleep in the barn or something like that. They wouldn't be sleeping in your house as a general rule. Not that from what I've read.
Right, but remember, Bass Reeves had his marshal star on, and so like that. That creates a different dynamic.
Maybe they would have all piled into the same bed. Who knows? But. Fleas and all, mixing their fleas.
But I did think it was very interesting as we're sort of like trying to sort out like where Bass stands and why he stands where he stands. When the woman offers to like, clean his thoughts, he's like, nah, man.
Yeah, no, I'm good with my thoughts. I'm just going to be right here with my thoughts.
I gotta hang on to my pain and anger to like walk the world the way I do.
Also to continue walking the world, creepy old lady. Grimm's fairy tales probably made it to Oklahoma by this point, I think.
Well, and every village tradition has its own fairy tales. So the Africans brought theirs over, and the Native Americans had theirs, and they all kind of go the same way. Don't walk alone in the dark.
Yeah, and don't accept weird gifts from strange old ladies that involve eating.
Right.
While you're in their house. You might end up in an oven.
Yeah. So then we get back with Sally and Arthur, and they're coming back from the carnival, and the brother shows up to yell at Sally and possibly beat up Arthur. And hey, Sally, you've been working in the garden. That's why you're strong enough to whack this kid.
She's Bass Reeves' kid, so you know that he taught her how to brawl.
Oh, yeah. And like she's sort of seen like how he gets by in the world. You don't take nothing from nobody in one way or another.
Yeah. Although that certainly did not end up well for many, 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 many people.
Yeah. And I think Sally kind of realizes that she messed up because, they get picked up by Jenny and Esme. And I just had this flash. I was like, she's sort of having an Oregon Trail moment. Every single choice she has, except just doing nothing and keeping her trap shut, is the functional equivalent of dying of dysentery. Because like she can't confess to her mom what really happened. Arthur doesn't have anybody he can tell, and so like nobody can warn anybody about like what's coming at them.
Yeah, and there's clearly going to be some pissed off white trash headed their way very shortly.
Like bad stuff is coming, but they're too afraid of getting beat by their parents to like warn them.
Yeah. This is who knows how many times weird stuff like just trivial little shit like teenagers getting into a fist fight ended with whole families dead because of racism.
I believe there are many, many, many.
Yeah.
Woo. Yeah. Because it can't just.
But it's just such a sad, stupid thing.
Because it can't just be about two kids getting in a fist fight and they gotta like learn how to make nice and live with it. No, it becomes like a family honor thing. And so again, holding on to these grudges for too long, it's a problem.
How long should you hold on to a grudge, Greta? Pass down some wisdom to us. What's the waiting period?
I don't know, but a lot less time than Bass wants to, that's for sure.
Are you a grudge holder?
I was very much as a kid, and my parents sort of pointed out to me how it was making my life worse. And so, there's still a few things that, I just won't do or places I won't go, but mostly it's petty and I laugh about it.
I hear you. I'm pretty good at holding grudges. I think that's where I get my good grip strength from.
But again, the way this episode ends, I was just watching this, and again, there's so little talking for the last scene, and they just like let the sounds, like when he drops the money to pay the couple, and they're out on that porch and they're looking out over the Red River, and like you can understand there is sort of like a big wide open hopefulness about this, and yet you're taking this guy to be hung. Like the countryside, I think, is such a great character in this show, and I'm glad they spend as much time showing us, hey, this is the wilderness and this is what it looks like.
Yeah, Oklahoma has a really interesting look.
Especially when you get around all of those rivers and lakes and everything, too.
Yeah. It's, Jesus, it's flat. It is just the flattest.
It is flat, but I did think it was interesting that they had them, like, actually riding their horses along that dry riverbed. Because you sort of looked out, and there was, like, all of the, like, those shrubs and the sagebrush and the trees. Like, that's, like, riding through big trees is fine, but when you're down where it's low and scrubby, those bushes are a pain in the ass to get through, and then they have, like, snakes in them.
Oh, yeah, the wash is definitely where you travel. Everybody travels in the wash, like every animal. So yeah. I used to take my dogs for walks in washes because it's a natural barrier, like you said, because there's thorn bushes all around everything otherwise, and cactus and all kinds of stuff. So the dogs could go off the leash, and they wouldn't run into the street chasing something, but occasionally they would go running for 10 miles after a javelina. So, that's because the javelina would just walk past us on the creek, and sometimes the dogs would chase them.
Chase them.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we come up on Esau, Barry Pepper, sitting there on the dry riverbed of part of the Red River, and oh my God.
Boy, he could not look more 19th century. I mean, he is just like, he looks like he speaks authentic frontier gibberish.
Right. Oh my God, it's true. And it was very funny because the second time I watched it, I was like, I started like paying attention to like how many objects he had there. I'm like, he has pack horses. He's got a tent. He's got some barrels. He's got those sticks. He's got a pot. Like, there's no way that man doesn't have some pack horses. Or at one point had them.
Yeah, and so he's there to collect the prisoner, right?
I don't know. Maybe? Probably? All I know is that the work song that they stuck at the end of that's why that was like, put the nail in. I'm like, I'm going to be thinking about music for this whole episode. Because that was the way that song, call and response, it's that very limited range, and it's kind of drony. Like, that's the classic work song.
Right.
And yeah, I was like, that's a railroad worker song. That's a chain gang song.
I've been working on the railroad.
It's a work gang song of every kind. And I was just like, yep. The way that they're using human voices to fill as sound fill in this, and then just leaving these big, empty, open silences it's a different way of hearing the world that we are not used to. Like, you think about, you see everybody walking around with headphones in now, and they've got a podcast, or they've got music, or they've got something on where they are not listening to, the sounds around them.
I actually stopped listening to music all the time. It was because I got sick of pulling my headphones out to say hello to people as I walked. But because I walk everywhere, and so I just know everybody now. But
being friendly,
yeah,
what?
Yeah. But
stop listening to music.
It's kind of nice being a part of the world and hearing the birds and shit.
Yeah,
because it really does it puts a layer in between you and the rest of the world. There's like a wall.
Yeah. So, anyway, good episode of Bass. I think I am now, we are back to sort of where it's one episode at a time, because there's a lot going on, and there's a lot about the 19th century that's happening, that's forcing me to sort of go, oh, yeah, that's where that's from. So
I thought it was funny that their menagerie consisted of a lynx and a kangaroo. I mean, those are the only animals I saw, but it was still...
Well, and then they were standing in line to go see the elephant, too.
Oh, were they? Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, but who knows if it actually was an elephant.
Cool. I somehow didn't notice that, but every time I look down at my book to write a note, I think I missed something that was vaguely important. So
it would be interesting about whether the elephant was actually an elephant or if it was just another really big animal at this point. Like maybe they just had a giant water buffalo. How would you know that that wasn't an elephant if libraries didn't exist at this point?
That's true. It could have been like the wild man of Borneo.
Like libraries existed, but there probably wasn't much of one in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Yeah, you're right. And if it was, it probably was not in good shape.
It just had a bunch of different Bibles and writings by our founding fathers and a bunch of law books. I don't know. And pulp novels. Definitely pulp novels. Those would be in the dirty section in the back.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, boy. And people don't even know what we mean by in the back. But so in the back of video and music stores, or not music, but video and magazine stores, there used to be a back section for the dirty magazines and the dirty videos and things.
Well, there was a curtain.
Yes. It was very seedy. It doesn't sound seedy the way we're describing it, but everything in the 1980s was kind of gross and seedy. And then you're already in the video stores were not run by upstanding individuals.
No.
These people were making amateur porn in their free time, and they were gross. And then they bought this video store to cover their illicit activities or whatever. And yeah, that's who you rented videos from. So yeah, I'm sure.
Right, you're right. We lived through the entire existence of Blockbuster. And so before Blockbuster, it was just individuals who owned a store. And so there were no rules for how you had to keep the store. And nobody understands that there were public spaces with shag carpeting on the floor.
And those stores had a scent to them that was unique to porn shops and video stores of that time. I mean, that's the smell. It smells like, let's not even get into what it smelled like, but yeah, it wasn't good. Yeah. And every kid made that turn, and our noses were what stopped us from continuing past the curtain. It was, you hit the smell of the gross adult section, and you're like, I'm going the other way. That was vile. I didn't like that. And it's dark.
So mildewy shag carpet was like sort of the smell that lets you know that, you're about to take a wrong turn. I think now, sort of when you're walking around a city, like if the smell of marijuana smoke gets too strong, you're like, maybe don't want to go that direction. Public marijuana smoke. That's sort of these days what lets you know during the day.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been shutting down a lot of public activities in Philadelphia recently.
Yeah, because, it used to be people would show up.
Over-exuberant youth.
It used to be people would show up with brown bag alcohol, and now they just have little, vape cartridges of... Anyway.
Hey, you're doing a lot less damage smoking weed than you are drinking facing a bottle out of a brown bag. I can tell you that.
It's true. And it is really funny. All of that broken glass was immediately dangerous, but all of those little thrown away vape machine batteries are poisoning everything. So.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Lithium everywhere.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm sure there have been a lot of people that have slipped and fallen on those things. It's the banana peel of 2024.
Oh, God. Yeah, because they are slick, shiny plastic. All right. Mm-hmm. Well, next week we will be back for episode 6. But in the meantime, where can people find you?
At Plague of Strength on Instagram. I post every day, and it's always awesome. Today I posted about a decathlete that he just won the national championship in the United States, but he's a German citizen. Here's the thing. What's your fastest mile ever?
Oh, God. That was so long ago.
He is 6'6" and weighs 240 pounds. Mm-hmm. And he ran the 1500 in 4:42.
Holy crap.
As the 10th event in 2 days, and he ran a mile in under 5 minutes. It just berserk. He's superhuman. So I write about all kinds of stuff like that every day. And how about you? What do you do?
Well, I am firmly in the 19th century learning about what a crazy ass century that is. And I'm talking about it through the lens of food and food technology. So you can learn how not to poison yourself with your refrigerator, or why glass jars are so damn cool.
Will we learn about iodine and salt?
Iodized salt is a 20th century innovation.
Is it? I thought it was 19th century.
So first of all, we have to go through the late 19th century goiter belt.
Oh.
No, the goiter belt is a 19th century thing, and so it was the early 20th century that iodized salt.
Is that a swath of America, the goiter belt, and it was like a part of America that got goiter, or?
Yeah. There was a part of America due to the sort of the low variety amount of sort of food that they were eating, and just like a lot of just like cornmeal and not enough meat, not enough vegetables, that it was just sort of like fat and carbohydrates, and so they weren't getting
fat back in cornbread. Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah, and molasses or not molasses. I don't know. So you never get it along the coast, because as long as you eat just any seafood, you'll get some iodine.
And everybody was eating oysters, so it was almost impossible, except for in this one, unless you were really, really poor in like Middle America, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I was looking that up when I was just researching my most recent episode on salt, and I was like, well, damn, okay, that's later. And the sort of the F1 rate out of what we think of as Middle America, but was sort of Northwestern America at the time. Mm-hmm. They're like, these people can't be inducted into the Army, because it not only does it cause goiter, but it causes very preventable mental retardation that's irreversible if it goes on long enough.
Is goiter where you look like a bullfrog?
Yeah. Your thyroid gets all swollen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's a thyroid problem.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is it hyperactivity or hypo?
I don't know. That is beyond my scope of research. I had to learn about the difference between washing soda, caustic soda, all the sodas, and
Oh, and baking soda?
Baking soda comes a little bit later, but that too.
Oh, cool. All the sodas. Well, I mean, I had to get
all the sodas.
That was the first soda that came into my mind, so.
That's what we all think of now, but no, baking soda came later. Oh, cool. But caustic soda, washing soda, soda ash, pot ash. Like, I unravel all of these nomenclature things that are like hard to get your hands around, because there's a bunch of like information missing links there.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That stuff is so valuable. It doesn't seem valuable when you're learning it, but it's like the glue that holds all the information in your brain together. Little pieces like that are so valuable. Right. And that's why I love doing this show with you so much, because you never know what that little piece is that you need in order to put your puzzle together in your head. And so sometimes it's something as weird as baking soda or caustic soda or one of the other potash or whatever you so awesome. Yeah. You are the best. All right. Well, until next week then.
Let's come back and have fun in a week. I will see you then.
All right. Awesome. See you.
And you can always reach out to us by email at pcgpodcasters@gmail.com. And you can find more dope beats like this one from royalraven.com.